Turning now to the war in Ukraine and how today's update is unfolding politically.
Joining us now is North Central College professor William Muck. Thanks for being with us and breaking this down, helping us break this down.
Always good to be here.
So Putin says he agrees on the principle with the deal, but wants to see some other terms. What are those?
Well, it's not entirely clear, right? So he said he likes the idea of a ceasefire, and I think that's really, really telling. Everybody likes the idea of a ceasefire. It really gets to the details, and I think what we've seen out of Russia and Vladimir Putin is they're nowhere near any sort of deal. I mean, what they've said, what Russia has said, is they want more territory in Ukraine, and they want to shrink the Ukrainian military, and they want to have no European or NATO presence in Ukraine, and these are just deal breakers for Ukraine. So Russia, I think, is going to sit back, and Putin will sit back and say, hey, we love the idea of a ceasefire in theory, but we've got to talk about the nitty-gritty, and I think they'll never actually be willing to move on that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say to you. This is just going to really lead to a back and forth, isn't it? So it's making the president's attempt to try to settle things look like we're on the right path, but in the reality, are we even really close?
I don't think we're close, right? And I think President Trump wants this to look good, right? I think he wants to be seen as a deal maker, wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. But the reality is getting an actual ceasefire and then getting a long-term security agreement is really hard. It's not easy work. You have to get both sides to compromise. And what we've seen out of Ukraine is that they are actually willing to compromise. We're seeing that they are open to giving up some territory to ceasefire. They are willing to compromise, but we've seen no movement out of Russia. And I think Russia and Putin in particular thinks that they're in a really strong position. So I wouldn't anticipate that they're going to be overly cooperative as this moves forward.
Well, hope is still on the horizon, I guess we could say here, but the American involvement, would that actually lead to a breakthrough this time, though? We've seen all the back and forth.
Well, this is a really, really important question, right? And I think it gets down to where is Donald Trump in all of this? And we've seen over the last couple of weeks that he's not very patient with Ukraine. Just was a little over a week ago that he was belittling Zelensky in the Oval Office. I think the president has a kind spot for Putin and Russia, right? So what does that mean if Trump can't get a deal in the near future? What does that mean for U.S. support for Ukraine? I think Zelensky's pretty good at playing the international game. He's looking to Europe for more support. But at the end of the day, the United States is so central to Ukraine's defense. And this is a long-term problem for Ukraine if the United States turns away.
Do we really know what is in this so-called possible agreement?
Well, we know the ceasefire, we have a general sense of what that means. And basically, they're talking about, no troop movements and there's no missiles that are going to be launched back and forth. But in some ways, the ceasefire is really the small deal. The long-term deal is the idea that you get towards some long-term security agreement. And so the ceasefire is just sort of a 30-day temporary to allow those more difficult conversations to occur.
All right. Professor Muck, thanks so much for joining us and always providing your perspective and expertise on the subject.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate your time.